Hey everyone, sorry this took ages to be posted. The first part of this series really flopped, so I kind of lost motivation to make the second part, but here it is. And one last thing, I have a Discord. It's a lot of fun and me and my mods put a lot of time into it. The link is in my description and pinned comment. Anyways, please enjoy. 5 days after their fight, Kageyama sat in his bedroom, setting a bowl to himself while laying on his bed. It had been 5 days since he'd last seen Hinata, 3 days from the suspension, and then all weekend. That also meant it had been 5 days since he last played volleyball, and he found himself wishing he'd never have to go that long without it again. But even more so, he begrudgingly found himself wondering how he'd gone 15 years without Hinata. 5 days without him had been torture enough, and although he'd never admit it out loud, he really did miss him. His loud and happy personality when they were with the team had become a staple for Kageyama's own happiness, but so had the other side of Hinata's personality, the uncharacteristically soft-spoken side of him that Hinata only ever showed when they were alone. It was the gentle and well-worded compliments he'd give when they were practicing alone, a stark contrast to the compliments he'd give Kageyama in front of the team that mainly consisted of gua and whoosh. It was the precise and gentle touch of Hinata's fingers as he tended to a sore muscle after they practiced late into the night, opposing how Hinata would jokingly tease Kageyama if he got hit with a ball during team practice. There was so much more Kageyama could say had been the cause of his feelings for the ginger, but he didn't feel the need to list it out in his mind again, having already done that during many sleepless nights. Thinking about his feelings was too much for Kageyama, so he ended up slipping on running clothes and let his feet take him wherever. Even though it was 8 PM and dark out, he found himself at the place he and Hinata usually played volleyball outside of school, an old abandoned recreation field. It had an old torn up volleyball net and a football field, and it was surrounded by tall oak trees that were beginning to change color. Stashed away in a hole in one of the trees near the net was a volleyball Hinata had left there a while ago. On the day they discovered the field, flashback, Kageyama, look, there's a volleyball net. Can we please play? We just practiced for 3 hours, Dumbus. And that's never stopped us before. We have exams coming up soon too. Is this Kageyama I'm talking to? You've never cared about exams, and it's not like you're going to pass them either way. At that, Kageyama started chasing Hinata around the field, who was laughing his ass off as Kageyama yelled profanities at him. Although his words held no real conviction, the truth was, he did want to practice, but he didn't want to be around Hinata, because at practice, that day was when he had his big epiphany regarding his feelings for Hinata. It had come about in the stupidest way possible. He had overheard Tanaka talking about his feelings for Kyoko for the millionth time. Describing how love felt for him, Kageyama realized that he felt the same for Hinata. Although he had much more of an emotional attachment to Hinata than Tanaka had with Kyoko, Hinata had ran around a tree, hugging onto it while laughing hysterically. Oh, look Kageyama, this tree has a hole the perfect size for a volleyball. We don't have a ball though, Dumbus. I'll go to my house and get one. Wait, no. My house is closer, and I have my bike. I'll go. You wait here. And so Kageyama was left alone with his thoughts as Hinata raced home to grab a spare volleyball. With the realization of his feelings, warmth blossomed in his chest, but also worry. He pulled a pocket knife out of his backpack and stood up, going to the tree with a hole. He went to the other side of the tree, and like a cliche teenager from a coming-of-age movie, carved a heart with T+S inside. The two boys played until the sun was gone, the full moon illuminating the field and just enough light to play by. Kageyama looked at the carved heart as the two were leaving, wondering if Hinata would ever feel the same. He didn't want to be hurt. From that day on, his feelings only grew more. But so did the walls around his heart. Flashback ends. After grabbing the volleyball, he went to the other side of the tree and looked at the heart he had carved months ago. It was a little more worn away now, but still there. He ran his finger over the lines of the heart and the initials. This was the worst fight the two ever had. He found himself considering that maybe putting walls up around his heart ended worse than admitting his feelings. So their obvious choice of what Kageyama had to do the next time he saw Hinata: apologize and confess. Meanwhile with Hinata had been biking all over town all weekend. Bored out of his mind without his other half to practice with, he ended up at Sakanoshita Market, and out of habit, bought 2 meat buns. When he left the store, he realized he'd accidentally bought an extra, being so used to getting one for Kageyama. He decided to go to the recreation field to eat the meat buns and maybe do some one-person volleyball exercises. He biked to the field, his thoughts rotating between volleyball, his dinner, and Kageyama. When he arrived, he was surprised to see his setter there. He was slumped against the tree, and in the pale moonlight, he could tell that Kageyama was hugging Hinata's spare ball. Kageyama's stomach dropped hearing the voice he recognized immediately: Hinata. Hinata warily stalked over to the boy, mulling over the apology he'd practiced in his head many times. He stood in front of the setter, who was still sat down in front of him. After getting closer, Hinata heard quiet stuttering breaths and sniffles, but he couldn't tell if Kageyama was crying, since his head was buried in his knees. But then Kageyama looked up at Hinata, and his watery eyes and tear-stained cheeks answered Hinata's question. And holy shit, Hinata realized Kageyama was showing emotion, and this only made Hinata feel worse. After all, he'd called Kageyama heartless, and here he was crying and fully vulnerable in front of him. Suddenly, Kageyama grabbed onto the bottom of Hinata's jacket and tugged him to the ground. Hinata fell onto his knees, but the slight pain didn't register in his mind, because Kageyama pulled him into a hug. His face rested in the junction between Kageyama's shoulder and neck, their chests flushed together. Kageyama's arms were tight around Hinata's waist, his nose pressed into Hinata's hair. I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing? You're not the one who did something wrong. I'm the one who should be apologizing here. I'm really sorry, I was just frustrated and had a lot of energy that I took out on you. If they were in a different situation. Kageyama world laughed, because when did Hinata not have a lot of energy? Well, then I'm apologizing for being so closed off that you would think I wouldn't love people. Because the truth is, I do love. It might only be one person, but that one person is the only person who really matters to me. I want to show you something. Hinata and Kageyama stood up, then Kageyama took Hinata's hand and walked to the other side of the tree. Hinata didn't see it immediately, so Kageyama had to point at it. He was embarrassed and not sure how to voice his feelings, so he hoped showing the carved heart would get his point across. T+S. Tobio and Shoyo, you made that. I carved it the first night we found this place. It was the same day I realized my feelings for you. Hinata could only stare back and forth between the carving and Kageyama. Hinata's face showed an array of emotions. First doubt, then recognition, then excitement, and lastly, something softer, love. Hinata ran back to the other side of the tree, and Kageyama nervously followed. Hinata squatted down and pushed back the overgrown grass and dead leaves, then signaled Kageyama to sit down next to him. Kageyama couldn't believe what Hinata was showing him, another heart carving. H+K, I made this that night too, since you left first, although I'd known about my feelings for you since the middle school match. Kageyama could barely form words, an excited and happy blush rising up his face and swallowing him whole. That long. Well, my mom had always told me about love at first sight, and I never believed in it, but seeing someone as passionate about volleyball as me, and well, someone as pretty as you, it was kind of hard not to fall right then and there. Kageyama grabbed Hinata's hands, intertwining them with his own, smiling gingerly at Hinata. You helped me become a better setter, a better person. You changed volleyball for me in the best way. You're the first teammate of mine that trusted me. You were my first partner in volleyball, my first real friend. I know I didn't show it, but I was scared to see you run away from me after our fight. I thought I'd lost all the progress I'd made since middle school. Hinata could hardly believe this was the same boy he'd called heartless earlier in the week. This was nowhere near what Kageyama was usually like. He was really being vulnerable and warm. Hinata felt his heart well at this new side of Kageyama. It was endearing and reassured Hinata that he wasn't the only one who felt so strongly about their connection. Can I kiss you? Kageyama brain nearly short-circuited at the question, but nonetheless he nodded. It was slow, inexperienced, and a little bit uncertain, but both boys felt butterflies in their stomachs. Hinata's small giggles made it a little difficult, and so did the smile that fought its way onto Kageyama's face. But as people say, it's the thought that counts, and both of the boys' thoughts were that they were in love and never letting go of the other.